All right, ladies and gentlemen, version 2.2 has been live for quite a while, a few days, and with it, of course, we're getting a reset of a lot of different game modes, and the Tower of Adversity is the first one up. And I gotta say that this reset of the ToA is probably one of the biggest examples of Kuro listening I have ever seen. Because they've gone ahead and they've made all of the different buffs to all of the different sections of the tower way more accessible compared to the prior reset. And I do believe that they've gotten a lot of feedback when it comes to some of the buffs being considered a bit more predatory and a bit more limited to other characters. Let me just show you all an example of one of the prior buffs that was in the reset and why I'm saying this most recent one is such a breath of fresh air in comparison. So with that, here's going to be an example of a buff from a prior reset, just bringing up one of my older videos. You can see over here, enemy glacier resistance decreases by 10%. When Resonators cast their Liberation, their attack is increased by 5%, and they gain a 10% resonance skill damage bonus for 3 seconds, stacking 4 times. Carlotta is the only character, right? Like, this buff basically stacks up every time you cast your Liberation, and Carlotta is essentially the only character in the game that's able to trigger their Liberation multiple times in a row like this, up to 4 times. And the end result is that you basically have a 5% attack buff and a 10% resonance skill damage bonus for 3 seconds. And that's kind of like the full extent of the buffs that you're getting. And that was awful. That was garbage, right? That was terrible to have in a side tower, which is typically super easy as you get more and more investment. And so all a predatory and limited buff like this did was hurt the progress of other characters. And so when you take a look at some of the buffs in this reset, just keep in mind that they're not going to be as specific as this, and they're going to be a lot more accessible for pretty much every single unit on the roster. So with that, we've covered what some of the prior buffs are looking like. Let's get into what the current state of the ToA looks like. We're going to go ahead and start off with the right tower, which is the one that we just saw in the prior reset. And boy, oh boy, you're going to like what you have to see here. So for this reset on the right tower, what we're going to have is when Resonators cast their Resonance Liberation, their attack is increased by 20%, and they gain a 40% heavy attack damage bonus for 15 seconds. And then the enemy's arrow resistance is decreased by 10%. It's pretty clear over here that this buff is tailored towards one character in particular. It is going to be Gian, who typically deals a heavy amount of heavy attack damage. He's clearly arrow as well, and he's going to get the most possible benefits from that stage buff. However, what you do have to keep in mind is that when it comes to this stage buff, well, it's only upon casting a Resonance Liberation, and your attack is still going to be increased by 20%. And so, while you might not gain all the full advantages of using a 40% heavy attack damage bonus, but you might, just depending on the unit that you're using. You could use Phoebe on this side as well if you wanted to. You're still going to get a 20%, even if you can't use the heavy attack. And what that means is that just, well, it's a lot more accessible. It's a lot more player friendly, and you don't need to feel like you need to pull a specific character just to be able to use the buff at all. Much like you're seeing over here, where it's very extremely tailored towards Carlotta. So this is already a great start. Let's go ahead and let's take a look at the left side and see what we have going on over here. The left side, on the other hand, enemy spectral resistance is decreased by 10%, and hitting a target with a heavy attack applies 2 stacks of Spectral Frazzle, and the effect can be triggered once every 2 seconds. For every stack of Spectral Frazzle inflicted, the target takes 5% extra damage, capping up to 50%, right? Because you can get 10 stacks total. And this is very different from some of the prior resets we had, where you could only get a 5% damage buff for every stack of Frazzle, and there was no external way via the buff to apply it. But with this whole situation, all you need to use is a heavy attack, and there are a lot of team compositions in the game that weave in heavy attacks into their rotations. And you'll just build up the stacks of Spectral Frazzle, you'll enable Phoebe, or even if you don't have Phoebe, you'll still be able to build up the stacks to 10 if you're playing your team comp in a certain way, and you'll be able to leverage the full damage buffs if you're able to build those stacks up. And while some teams admittedly won't be able to use the heavy attacks, you can go ahead and search for a lot of different characters that, well, weave heavy attacks into the rotation, right? You clearly have a Phoebe. Shorekeeper does a couple of heavy attacks as well with their Forte circuit. You always have Rosia, who's a big heavy attacker as well, and Yinlin, surprisingly enough, likes using heavy attacks when she's doing her rotation on the field. It's pretty much easier for me to say which characters you probably don't want to use based off of how their kits work. You probably don't want to put in a Jinsei because you're never using her heavy attack. Jeja as well never uses her heavy attack. Camellia literally doesn't have heavy attacks. And so these are kind of like the characters that won't be able to leverage the buffs. But I imagine that if they're at like level 90 and they're well invested, you don't even have to worry about it anyways. Because do keep in mind, these enemies, they're stuck at level 90. They're not too much of a struggle. And typically the left and right sides, those final towers, they're pretty damn easy when you get higher investment. And so these buffs that you're seeing over here, they're mostly tailored towards less invested players. And so I'm glad that they're far more accessible. And again, not like the stuff that we're seeing over here. Kuro Games did in fact listen. So with that, that's going to be the side buffs. Now let's dive into some of the buffs in the middle tower. And this is where things could get a little bit dicey depending on whether or not you have Cantarella. But we'll be testing it all out to see just how difficult this stuff really is. So we've got our middle tower buff. Enemy fusion and havoc resistance is decreased by 10%, and glacier resistance and electro resistance is increased by 10. Casting an echo skill increases attribute damage bonus by 6% for all resonators in the team, stacking up to 4 times. The same resonator with identical echoes cannot trigger this effect multiple times. And so this means that even if you have an echo that has like charges, let me just bring up some examples of units that can cast echo skills multiple times in their rotation and are actually encouraged to. The first one we have over here is, of course, Carlotta's, which has a baseline cast. And then every time you use a Resonance Liberation, stacking up to 4 times, it'll reset the cooldown of the ability and actually cause it to freeze the target. And so Carlotta can actually use 2 Echo skills pretty easily in her rotation if you're playing a little bit sweaty. But do keep in mind, she's only going to be able to activate 1 of those 4 potential stacks. Same exact story with Camellia over here, who has an Echo skill for best in slot. Nightmare Crownless over here, which comes with 3 initial charges. And so even if it has charges, using it multiple times is not going to allow you to get more than 1 stack of the buff. Because, like the description is saying, ladies and gentlemen, echoes that are identical, right, that can be activated multiple times, they won't trigger the effect multiple times. There's actually one more character that might be able to reach all 4 of the buffs, and that is, of course, our resident clown, Rosia. Due to the fact that her magical box, right, which is something that activates on an outro skill, this also counts as an echo skill with a separate name, as you're seeing in this description over here. And so Rosia is another character that will allow you to reach the full 4 stacks. And so a team like this, where you are running like Camellia, Shorekeeper, and Rosia, that's going to be another team that'll be able to fully leverage all of those potential benefits. So Rosia and Shorekeeper, the 2 new Havoc characters in 2.0, they will be able to actually fully leverage this 36% crit damage buff. And so Cantarella is kind of the only character on the roster that is going to be able to access the full 4-stack bonus. Because, well, her enhanced resonance skill, Flickering Reverie, right? The one that inflicts the Hazy Dream, you know, when she's in Mirage, her enhanced state, that counts as an echo skill, as you're seeing right over here, counts as 1. And then her super powerful Perception Drain move also counts as an echo skill. So that's another one over there. And the 3rd echo skill that she has in her kit is, of course, Flowing Suffocation, which is just her initial liberation cast. So Cantarella's got 4 echo skills on her own. She can basically, in one rotation, fully stack up this buff and grant you this big crit damage boost of 36%, and similarly, that attribute damage bonus of 24%. However, even if you don't have Cantarella, you still have an attribute damage bonus that can be stacked up to 3 times by cycling through the echo skills of your team. And that's going to be 18%, which is still something. You still have 18% attribute damage bonus just from putting in pretty much any team in the game. And, you know, it sucks that you're not able to get the full 4 stacks, but Kuro's got to sell the characters somehow, and you still get something. It's not like the other buffs. Again, I'll bring up this example again, where you basically get nothing unless you're using Carlotta. You'll still end up with 18% attribute damage bonus. And so we'll see what some of the comparisons are looking like, right? We'll run probably one of these floors with Cantarella, we'll run one of the floors without, and we'll see just how much of an impact this buff is having. So with that, our first enemy up on this floor is going to be the Tempest Mephis. Very, very interesting boss fight. It does have some iframes at the beginning, but it's not as annoying as the Thundering one. Then we've got 2 waves, an Abyssal Patricius, some of the elites from the Black Shores, Lumascale over here, and then Renacida over here. And then we're going to have the Mech Abomination. So 2 Electro final bosses. The fact that it says Glacier Resistance and Electro Resistance over here doesn't really matter too much anyways, because guys, you weren't going to be using an Electro fucking unit like Zhangli or Yinlin against, well, 2 bosses that are straight up Electro in the first place. So it might as well not even say this Electro res increase because you're not going to use them anyways. Not a huge deal over here, just by how the bosses are rotating in and out. When it comes to the right side bosses, we're just going to have the Dragon of Dirge. And so we saw this guy on the last reset. He can be a bit of an issue, especially for melee units, because his camera work is one of the nastiest things I've seen in the game, but shouldn't be too much of a struggle now that we've had some practice. And on the final left side, what we're going to have is a bunch of Fraxidus assholes and Crownless. So this one could be one of the most tricky floors of all. Do keep in mind you won't want to use a Havoc character because you're going to have a bunch of Havoc resistant enemies. And similarly on the Dragon of Dirge, you probably don't want to use your Brant or your Zhangli. But thankfully enough, you'll have a spot for your Brant and Zhangli over here on this side, because nothing here is going to be immune to fusion. So we've covered all the floors, we've covered all the details of this reset. Now let's go ahead and give this a couple of tries. And what I wanted to do was actually a bit of a quick test, a bit of a fun test actually, using Jancy. Because of course, one of Jancy's best partners is actually going to be Cantarella. And what I want to do is start off one of these clears simply using Jeja, where we're not going to be able to leverage all the buffs, and then do one of the clears with, of course, Cantarella herself, where we'll be able to leverage all of the buffs completely and kind of see like what the differences are in clear time between the two, how powerful those buffs really are, and whether or not you need them. So with that, let's go ahead. Let's give our Jeja team a try. Here's going to be a preview of some of the stats before we hop in. Jeja's looking pretty good at 130, 82, 275. Jancy's going to be 77% crit and 266 crit damage. And then we're just going to have Verena over here kind of just jobbing in the corner. Yeah, she doesn't even have a full set. Let me go put that on her. Yeah, that'd probably be helpful. All right, she's got a full set now, and we'll use an R2 variation. We won't use an R5 one. R5 one is too strong. So that's going to be what the team comp is looking like for this one. And we're going to give it a try with Jeja, and then give it a try with Cantarella, and then see what the big differences in those echo skills are. We'll be making sure to leverage all the buffs too. Let's get right on into it. All right. So we're going to start off with just a very typical Jinxie rotation, getting off an enhanced nuke. The iframes at the start of this guy are not a huge deal. They're not a huge deal at all. We get that free Concerto skill, we go over to Jeja, quickly use the skill and then her Liberation, and then swap on over to Verena, who's gonna have, and then we're gonna use our Liberation over here to make sure that our Concerto is fully filled out. We missed the crit though, unfortunately. Okay. For some reason, my Concerto's taking a minute. And now we've got all of our echo skills active. And we should break this guy eventually. And then go right back to our Jeja. Use her Liberation. Her skill. And then swap over here. And have a little bit more fun with it. And this is kind of just what you do over and over when you're using this unit. Just pray that you get your crits.
Here comes a helper. Yeah, together we fight. Oh, stars. Heed my call.
Yeah, she's really refusing to crit today. And I guess I just tanked that laser beam, even though I really did think I dodged it. That's a little bit unfortunate. Yeah, that was a little bit rough. And you can kind of see the clear time isn't the best. I did miss a couple of crits. I did miss a couple of crits.
Here comes a helper. Together we fight. Take 4.
And that'll do us in for that one. So, not the most comfortable clear ever, but it was a clear. Now let's go ahead, let's return to the tower. We've gotten our experience with Jeja, and now let's try it out a little bit with Cantarella, knowing that we're going to be able to get more stacks of that buff and actually get that 36% crit damage bonus going. All of my characters are S0, R1, by the way. We are using String Master on the units, so this is like, we're not like big whaling on the account over here. When it comes to Cantarella stats, she's going to have 2.1k attack, 82, 273.8, and 136 ER. So we're going to have pretty consistent uptime on our abilities. We don't have the Cantarella Sig, though. We do have String Master, because I did want to get it. I already have String Master. It's a tricky circumstance making String Master this good of a weapon. So with that, let's go ahead. Let's give this one a stab, and let's see what the difference is.
Onwards.
We're gonna ignore those iframes at the start. Just start tossing attacks into him until we're able to activate
Evil be cleansed.
our enhanced nuke. Then go on over to Cantarella. Use our liberation. Boom. Use our echo skill. Boom. Get a little bit of hazy dream off.
Listen up. The fruit of together we fight. Thunder.
And then just cast all our echo skills, right? We've already gotten the 4 stacks. That's why our liberation is doing over 100k. And now we can just blast him again. Boom. And now we're back onto Cantarella. And now we're actually going to do like a full rotation on her.
Strike is one.
And you can kind of see, boy, oh boy, do I have a lot of my stacks. And unfortunately, we do miss the crit there. We do miss the crit there. That sucks, but you know, it happens.
How rude.
I can use some life is
It happens,
everything.
but yeah.
Together we fight.
When you're not at 100%, you might as well be at 0%.
Blessed ends.
And unfortunately, without Jeja on our team, we will not have our liberation handy here. Even if we do want it.
Strike is one. Oh, stars. Heed my
And so we're
call.
gonna have to just delay it over to this cast. But you can kind of see, boy oh boy, this is some high damage. And the end result is that the clear is faster if you are playing everything very well. You did see that I missed a crit there, a pretty important one to crit on. It only did like 100k. It probably would have done like 350, maybe even 400 if that crit was ready to go. But yeah, we missed the crit. Unfortunately, we don't get the sub 1 second time, but that's kind of like just how much of a power difference having Cantarella can have. It is, you know, not the end of the world if you don't have her. And this is probably the best team that you can use her in. And it will do pretty well when you're able to get up those 4 stacks of echoes. You can, of course, right, use a Carlotta too if you are looking for, you know, somebody that can leverage those resonant skill buffs, but this is probably like the second best team that Cantarella is going to actually have. You could also consider just using like a regular Havoc Rover, but you know, Cantarella's buffs aren't the best for them. So that's what floor 1 is going to look like over here. On floor 2, let's just go ahead and use our traditional rant. Let's just have like a little bit of fun with this one, and we'll just go ahead and we'll see what the big
Understood.
differences are using fusion and not being able to leverage all of those different echo skill buffs. All right, after resetting our team order a little bit, we are ready to go.
Let the flames rise!
Be reduced to cinders.
Worry not. Load astral modulation.
Oh, unfortunately,
Rectify. Perish.
Epic shot! Victory, same
Together we vanquish. Perish.
that was a little bit awkward.
at the helm!
That was a little bit
Climax of
awkward.
the show! More passion!
Feathers
Listen
incinerate.
carefully.
Together we vanquish.
In war with time.
Yeah, my Changlu was about to fly out of the ToA there for a second.
Perish in flames.
Loading.
Together we vanquish. Who's the caged bird now?
In the limelight!
And this is, again, all S0, R0 characters. And I do think that we'll be able to just get this big old boom off. And that'll probably finish him.
Together we vanquish.
All right, close enough. So, yeah, you can kind of see that floor is close to no issue at all. I do have pretty high investment on all my characters, and I did have like a couple of mess ups because this is like my first time ever facing it. But yeah, that's just like what an S0 R1 team is going to look like. Just for a bit of like an overview on what the investment is looking like on these units, I'll give you all a peek. We just got Chang Li at 68.9, 280, 120 ER. We got our Shorekeeper at 230, 224, 3.3k HP, and an R5 variation. And then we got Brant coming in at 265 ER, 85.9% crit rate, 237%, and of course a fusion damage bonus. So he is pretty much he's ready to swing. So yeah, overall middle tower is not looking too bad. I could definitely get a better time if I play a little bit more sweaty with this team, but yeah, second floor is probably going to be one of the easiest ones you have because the Mech Abomination is an absolute A unit or joke of a boss to fight against. And so yeah, that's our middle tower covered. Now let's get into some of the side towers. All right, we're gonna go ahead and just speed run all of this. We're gonna speed run this real fast. We're just gonna use a couple of random ass units to get us through. It's the lower difficulty stuff. It is what it is. We're gonna see a lot of Brant solos. All right, so that's gonna be the first three sides. Took us not very long at all. Now let's get into this side. So of course, Phoebe is like the main character that this is designed for, but that doesn't mean we have to use her. And so I was just thinking, why don't we see what Jian looks like in this lineup, considering his synergy with heavy attacks? I'm kind of interested. And let's put some gear onto him. We got Verdant Summit. He's looking pretty good. 120, 72.5, 282. And then we're going to have good old Mortifi over here on Static Mist.
I have experiments underway.
And let's put some coordinated attack gear on him as well. So we got that going, and we'll be using a Verena as well. We'll be using a Verena as well with the same exact stuff that she was on before. Let's give this a stab.
Listen up.
Fury boils. Inferno. Testing output. Tell truth from facade.
Just going through a typical rotation on this team. Do a little bit of grouping with that jump over there. And hopefully this is gonna hit. All right, what is this dude doing? Oh yeah, this is gonna be kind of annoying.
Fury boils as you wish.
Yeah, that start is not the most fun thing ever.
Fury boils. Burn. Feel my wrath. Testing out. You're wide open.
And our rotation's looking pretty good.
Settled.
And you're able to see that we're able to build up a pretty decent number of those Spectral Frazzle stacks and then gain that damage bonus, even though we clearly aren't, you know, Phoebe.
Fury boils. Tell truth from facade. As you wish. Testing out. Ready for battle.
And that should finish him. So, you can see, as long as you're able to use your heavy attacks, you will be able to stack up that Spectral Frazzle buff decently high, even without Spectral Frazzle units on your team. And so Phoebe is, of course, going to be one of the best units to use over here. But you can kind of see, even with no arrow-specific buffs, just simply having this Spectral Frazzle buildup lets a character like Jian absolutely shine. And so think about some of the other units that typically use heavy attacks in their kit. You know, like I mentioned before, the Yinlins and the Zhang Liao, they kind of got to do it for Yinlin to build up Concerto and to build up her Forte. She needs to use heavies, and then Zhang Liao needs to use a heavy to, well, you know, activate Void Thunder. So those are some potential options as well. And so now let's go ahead and get over to the right side. So for the right side, we're again just going to be using some units really fast just to, you know, get us through the entire ordeal. I'm just going to slot in a Camellia for fun, and we're just going to get through the first 3 stages. All right, so that's going to be that side. Now let's go ahead. Let's do something a little bit goofy over here. We do know that this side is clearly tailored towards Jian. We get that. Let's just go ahead and use Phoebe on this side for fun. And let's see how strong she is leveraging all of those different buffs in comparison to,
As we head toward our shared future,
slotting into Gian in this
leaving the
situation.
past behind.
So with that, we've got our Spectral Rover. I know his crit rate looks low, but he gets a lot of free crit. Don't worry about it. I know it looks really low. It'll work just fine in combat. This is our Phoebe. She is sharing gear with Spectral Rover. I can make her stronger, but it's not a big deal. And this is the Shorekeeper that we're going to be slotting in. So let's get right on into it and see how good this is going to be. We're just going up against the Dragon of Dirge, so I don't imagine this is going to be too much of a struggle. Or at least I hope it isn't. Okay, it feels like they got the hologram version. Why is he using all those attacks? So we're just building out some of those Spectral Frazzle stacks. Boom, boom. Oh, okay. He's like, he actually does a lot of damage. He actually just does a lot of damage.
Together we stand.
But with those heavy attack bonuses, we're kind of pumping.
Vow from the soul.
And we should comfortably too rotate his ass.
Astral modulation. Loading.
Swift and resolute. The hour is upon us. Hopefully this helps. I sense your weakness.
Sentinel protect me. Judgment time. Bluebird.
And just throw out our nuke. Boom.
Path is arduous.
So as you can see, the buffs do feel so much more universal. The buffs do feel so much more accessible towards a lot of units on the roster. Like I said, I'll say it again, Kuro really cooked with this reset. The fact that I'm using like the two opposite-sided characters and still feeling a lot of impact from the buffs, that's nice. It makes so much more of the roster feel usable. It makes your existing investments, your past characters that you've pulled and grinded for, it makes them feel a lot more versatile, and you can get a lot more creative with the comps that you're using and still feel some meaningful bonuses out of the buffs. I will say there's one bit of an issue with the ToA as time goes on, and that is the hazard records. Our number of ToA resets have essentially been halved. Okay, click claim. Okay, you get all of them at once. Nice. Yeah, our number of ToA resets has essentially been halved, and what that means is that we're not getting nearly as many hazard records in one reset in like a 30-day span of time than we used to before. And what that means is as you're like going into this shop and you're like, you know, trying to buy it out, you're not going to have nearly as many hazard records as you did in the prior resets when it was going twice a week. And so, unfortunately, right, that means that oftentimes it could be the best decision to kind of like leave this shop half empty so that you know you're going to be able to get things like the tuners later on. So that's something to keep in mind. Tuners are pretty much the #1 priority from that shop, and you're not going to be able to get as many as you did before. So maybe that's something that Kuro Games is going to look into. Maybe that's something that they already have looked into. I'm not sure if these hazard record numbers are completely different, but yeah, that's something to think about. If it has been fixed, disregard this, but if it hasn't, maybe something we could raise up to the devs. Overall, I would say that this entire ToA reset is a complete step above when it comes to balancing the game mode, when it comes to like balancing the buffs. You have clear advantages from pulling Cantarella, but you're still able to get decent ones without her. And when it comes to all the buffs that we're seeing on the side tower and stuff, they're specialized towards a unit, but they're not inaccessible. Again, much like how some of the past ToA resets were, specifically in 2.1. And so Kuro Games is listening. They are balancing the game mode better and better. And this reset probably has to be one of the best ones yet. I would say the hardest enemy in this reset is probably actually the Dragon of Dirge, because boy, oh boy, you do have a legitimate risk of dying against this guy. Even though they are in the right tower and even though they are level 90, holy shit. If you're not watching out for their abilities, they will like kill you in like 2 hits, and they'll get those hits off really goddamn fast. All the other tower floors, not really too much of a challenge at all. You just gotta watch out for the Mephis's laser. And this floor with Crownless, it's kind of a joke. Or at least it felt like a joke to me. So I would say hats off to Kuro Games. They listened once again, and this is so much more better than 2.1's reset. It's almost unbelievable. So with that, let me know what you all think. Peace.